Another key element to really designing for touch is understanding touch targets. A touch is not a click. If you're worked with Windows previously to Windows 8, the fidelity you get with a mouse click is much more accurate than with touch. I think with a mouse it's something like 14 pixels makes a good click point. But when you're looking at touch surfaces, really it's a good idea to stick to about 40 pixels or 7 millimeters as their smallest, ideally 50 pixels or 9 millimeters with a little bit of padding is best. Make sure that if you do have to go smaller than 9 millimeters, it's really important that users have an easy way to get out of things. If you absolutely must have smaller than that, say there's a lot of different elements that do different things, you might consider going down just a little bit more to 30 pixels with the 2 millimeter padding. It's important that users can get out of that easily, at least within one or two gestures to get back to where they were, or you'll find that users become very frustrated using that environment when the touch points are too small. Because with a finger can't, it just doesn't have the fidelity of a mouse or mouse click. And so with designing for Windows 8 and kind of the whole touch-centric UI, it's very important to consider this when doing custom elements inside your applications that are touchable, as it were. Now, another thing that's important to consider is touch posture. Now, what that means is how the device is viewed or held. The best areas for viewing, the best areas for interaction. And let's go ahead and talk about those specific ways of understanding touch posture so we can design our applications around that. So when looking at touch posture, for example, the best areas for interaction are going to be where the fingers are held. If you look at this diagram, you can see where it's best, better, and okay. The best, that's where if you're holding that device, where your fingers can reach easily, the way most users hold them. Or if the device is held the other way, of course, that middle area is where your thumbs generally will land, and they can interact with those elements. So those tend to be the best areas for interaction. And if there is touch-related interaction, it'll be easier and more pleasant for users if those touchable elements fall into that area. Now, for reading, it tends to be a little bit different. The best area for reading is going to be along the top, and that applies regardless of which way you're holding the device. You notice it better as you go down and then okay. And the reason is that when a user holds the device, sometimes their thumbs or part of their hand can go over those bottom corners on the right and left side of the device. And so it's easier for users to read when it's up at the top. When it's down there, then they have to move their hands or fingers or thumbs. And so what you end up doing, ideally, is the stuff they're going to be reading at the top, the stuff they're going to be interacting at the bottom, and then it's easier for users to consume and to interact with the application. When you take this into account, this concept of touch posture, when you're building your experiences on Windows 8 or for Windows 8. Now, touch posture, when you look at someone holding it, this is kind of the different postures that you're going to see, whether they're holding it, whether they're working on it. If you're building an app where there's going to be a lot of heavy typing, then you're going to want to design your app around that, where it's sitting in their lap and the keyboard is up. Whereas if there's light interaction, the other two ways of holding the device are great, but it's not going to be easy for users to really, do a lot of typing. But it's great for interacting and holding the device, as well as if you're designing an application that's going to be showing media, then by all means, they're not going to be interacting, their hands aren't going to be blocking, they're going to be sitting up and watching that the whole UI, so you can really show everything on the screen and they can read and see everything. So taking this stuff into account as you design your apps is an important part of making a well-designed application that users will want to be able to interact with. So now let's talk about branding patterns, designing for the Windows aesthetic versus a brand aesthetic. Now, a lot of times people will build an app and they will almost wash out the brand, and you can actually kind of merge the brand aesthetic with the Windows aesthetic and actually make something that stands out. Just because the average app does X, Y, or Z doesn't mean that there is some room to wiggle with regard to integrating with other brand and design elements. Incorporating brand into Windows 8 really allows you to push the limits of the Windows 8 aesthetic while still being in harmony with that Windows 8 aesthetic and building something that really can pop for the user. Breaking the mold, but not breaking the mold, which builds something that people are going to get excited and more engaged with. So let's take a look at two examples. Here is a great, well-designed application. It follows the Windows 8 aesthetic. We have our logo title in the upper left. We have some nice squares and the content laid out horizontally. We can scroll left or right, and we can touch this stuff and interact with it. Now let's take a look at this example, which really takes more of the original brand's feel and pulled it in. We've used background that brings in this idea of chocolate. There's a lot of pink, which has that frosting sort of feel. And you can see that we're not using squares, which a lot of people assume that the square is a mandatory element in Windows 8. And you can see here that while we're following the Windows 8 look and feel, we're also kind of merging it with that particular brand's aesthetic, and we bring something that looks more unique and will stand out against other apps. While the first one may look good, it very much can blend in with other apps that are looking just like it, where this allows you to take in more of that brand and bring it into your design and produce not only a look and feel that's consistent with that brand, but it also merges well with Windows 8 and allows that application to pop more visually for users against other applications that may be available on Windows 8. Now, when you actually go to start building your applications, you can, of course, use Visual Studio, but since we're really focusing on designing good Windows 8 experiences, we're going to go ahead and build a Hello World app, but we're going to do it in Expression Blend. So we're going to talk about, there's two key things in Blend. We're going to either be building in HTML or we're going to be building in XAML. And there's some great advantages to using either or, but Expression Blend will do both. And let's go ahead and create that Hello World from a design standpoint so we can start integrating and building out our touch experience in Windows 8 and see how that looks from kind of the design perspective. Okay, so I'm here on my Windows 8 machine, and I've got Visual Studio and Expression Blend installed, and we're going to go ahead and go over to the desktop where I've put my icon for opening up Expression Blend. And the first thing we're going to see, of course, is there is a new look and feel for Blend versus if you're familiar with older versions of Blend. But this is consistent with the Windows 8, but inside the desktop environment. So clearly, this has all the the complex set of tools for doing design and all that kind of stuff. So that stuff more or less has stayed the same, but the branding is a little bit different. We're going to go ahead and create a new project. Now here is where we're going to start to see a significant difference in that we can build apps for Windows Store either with HTML. We have a number of different types of applications out of the gate. and then for XAML, which is the more traditional way that you would build apps in Expression Blend. So our first one, we'll go ahead and create a grid app, for example, in Expression Blend. We'll go ahead and click OK. And I want to show you that you get a lot of the elements for free that look like Windows 8 out of the box. So you can see if we adjust our little panes here. Let me grab that. You can see that we have a fully baked kind of look and feel for free, and we can select these items and get to the properties that you would expect in Blend. There we go, we pull it out. So we have all the standard properties here, whether it's color, appearance, doing some transforms, text properties, that sort of thing. And of course, remember, you get your extended properties with these little drop downs. And in this case, we want to say hello world, and we can just save that. Remember, if you want to see the XAML, you can always hit split view and see what it's actually doing as you make those changes. Down here, let's go ahead and hit F5. And we see that our application comes up and we can touch it. We're going to use the mouse for doing that. Scroll right or left. So this application, by default, you get all this plumbing for doing this. This is all data bound. You can use your mouse to work with everything, but it's really touch centric. We get our individual items, we get our group items, and we can do whatever we can customize it to build our applications. You don't have to use this particular way of doing it, but this is a good way, and then you can customize it around your particular brand or aesthetic or functionality that you might want to do. So that's Hello World using XAML. So let's go back and do that in HTML. So here is our application. So let's close that, and we'll open up Blend again so you can see how to create the HTML version of the same thing. So we're going to create a grid application, hit OK. Now you'll see some differences here with the properties because, of course, we're working with HTML instead of XAML. So these property panes you can see include things, HTML properties, CSS properties. You can see that we open two different code views when we're in split mode. Let's try to change the size here so we can get a better view of what we're doing. Of course, most of the panes do the same thing, like this tree. Instead of XAML elements, we have the HTML elements, but it really helps us get to what we're trying to do. And then, of course, we select an item, and we get all the properties over here, and that we can set, manipulate, and then, of course, the same thing, F5 to run and deploy this, and we get our basic Windows 8 application. It looks very, very much like the XAML based. So it's really, if you're familiar with HTML or doing design work in HTML, you can use this. And what's cool about doing it with HTML5 is that your other tools, whether it's Adobe tools or TextPad or Dreamweaver, anything that builds HTML, for the most part you can integrate with your design experience in Blend, bring in your HTML elements, you can use jQuery, whatever you want to do, and then these applications are actually run natively. Even though they're in HTML, you don't need an abstraction engine like say PhoneGap or something to be able to build applications like this. It's actually native, so if you have those skills, that's really a great a great thing to jump into. So whether it's HTML or XAML, from a design standpoint, it's really a lifestyle choice having to do with what you're used to. Now that we've created our initial Hello World kind of applications in the context of Expression Blend, let's talk a little bit about solution types and language choices. And really a lot of this is more a lifestyle choice. You know, if you're really a C++ programmer and need some hard programming stuff you need to do, we've got that covered. If you want to be able to use XAML, if you're familiar with using all the XAML design tools, you can pick different things, whether it's C# or C++. So let's go ahead and iterate through that stuff and talk about the lifestyle choice implications that might have for you as someone that's designing and building Windows 8 experiences. So that first solution type is going to be C, C++, and XAML. You wouldn't have to use XAML necessarily, but in the context of Blend, if it's going to be C, C++, Blend is going to be doing design work in XAML. And the XAML part would be the same, but of course the code behind, you'll probably want to do that all in Visual Studio. There's also C# or VB in XAML, which if you're a .NET programmer or you have some .NET experience, that's a great choice. From a design standpoint, it's the same. XAML is XAML. If you're familiar with that and not doing any coding, then maybe that project or solution types might be up to the programmer. But remember, for each one of these types, there's going to be multiple different project types, as it were, whether it's C# and XAML or HTML and XAML. There's going to be different things inside there that'll give you some of that out-of-the-box Windows 8 look and feel that you can use. On top of C#, VB, and XAML, you can also do HTML5-ish, and what that means is that to the best of Microsoft's ability, it's supporting HTML5, but for the foreseeable future, HTML5 has not been officially blessed by the W3C, and so there is some potential for some flux there in the standard, or the HTML5 standard, that hasn't been officially blessed yet. But you can use that as a type. So if you want to build native applications and design them using, if you have a lot of HTML or web experience, this is a great type that you can just jump in, and then the code and logic for that is all JavaScript, and you can bring different elements in using whether things like jQuery and so forth into that environment, and they work for doing native applications in HTML and JavaScript. But really, regardless of the type that you're using, what you really need to consider is the devices, the device types, multiple screens, and how that stuff you're building actually transforms between different screens. For the most part, all of these types are going to do that well. And then the various types of solutions for each one of the solution types is really providing you a lot of that infrastructure. When we talk about multiple screens of devices, what we are really talking about is cross Microsoft screens. So we're not generally talking about something that is going, say, from a non-Microsoft screen to, say, Windows 8 tablet. We're talking about going from a Windows 8 tablet to another Windows 8 tablet, or from a Windows 8 tablet to a desktop or a laptop, or from the laptop to a device or other mobile device. So when we talk about screens in that context, generally type doesn't matter too much. But if you are talking about a cross-platform scenario, say you want to build an application that's going to run on Windows 8, it's going to run on Windows 8 phone, it's going to run on desktops, laptops, and then it's also going to run on Android and or iOS-based devices, you're really going to be focused on using HTML-based stuff, because you can pick that up and run that in those different environments. Now, there may be some performance that you lose on those other platforms because the HTML and JavaScript is kind of has another layer between it and the hardware, where Windows 8 has really pulled it down into the operating system. But if the multiple screens and devices and device types is going to translate to cross-platform mobile development, then that's really where you need to build those apps to minimize the amount of work you have to do, unless you wanted to go entirely native on each platform, in which case you're going to be building that stuff entirely from scratch in each case. So let's take a closer look at some of those solution types and what they mean for us. So we're going to jump into Expression Blend again and go to that new project dialog. So let's look at XAML first. You'll notice down here we have our language selector, and based on the language we select, we get different types of projects. There's basically a project type for each one of these for each language. A lot of people will either be C# or C++ if they're doing some really high performance graphics engine stuff. Maybe you might want to live there, or VB if you come from a VB background. But each one of these project types gives you the same kind of infrastructure regardless of which language you're picking. And you can, if you select these, you can see you get an explanation of which one. We showed you the grid application for our Hello World, which is really giving us the infrastructure for building kind of that 3-tier panorama sort of view, Windows 8 standard kind of application. Then there's a split application, which is kind of a 2-page solution where you have maybe an app bar navigation at the top, and then maybe some detail pages as well as that top level page based on that top level linear navigation element that you use inside of your app. And that's great for when you're like switching between tasks, as opposed to, say, a news application, which would probably fit more into the grid application framework. You can, of course, start with a blank app, which is just a blank app, and you don't have all the grid and all that other infrastructure kind of pulled in for you. And of course, if you're building class libraries and runtime components, that's there available for you as well, but there's really not as much design element. Maybe if you're designing controls, but you can't run those by themselves, as it were. So we created a grid application earlier. A blank application is just that. So let's take a look at the split app in XAML. And we're going to go ahead and go with the C#. So we got to give Blend a second to generate all that. And you'll see we have that split view. We have the controls we're able to select, and we have all the design elements for being able to tweak that. But let's take a look at what's actually created for that template. You can see that we have the items page, which is kind of where the application starts, and if they were to drill down, they're going to get one of these, this split page view here for looking at that detail. So here's our list. You're going to touch one of these and you're going to get that detailed content over here. And then, of course, we have a data model. There's some sample data provided, so you can just extend that. Of course, there's some infrastructure that you're getting for free, say like bindable base, things like that, that allow you to have data in design time. So like in this case, that binding infrastructure gives us something to look at as a designer, so we can go ahead and style this as we need to. We can right-click, go down to edit templates, or create new templates, and we can get to the things we need to do our styling. But we get all of that infrastructure is built in for you by using those templates, as opposed to a blank one, which you're going to have to be a little bit more careful as you do that design work to be able to not break too far out of the Windows 8 aesthetic. Now also, if you look at this top level page, we can get to our code only view, and you can kind of see, if you're familiar with XAML, see that stuff. You'll notice that the infrastructure is there for switching between grid view and list view. So that is used to switch between the snapped and the full screen mode, and you get that for free. It builds out the visual states here, so your visual state manager in Blend can be used to manipulate that. And then, of course, you can add anything else you might need, app bars and so forth, to here or here, and get that all ready to do your styling and your design work in Expression Blend. So let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks like. So hit F5, it does a build deploy, and so here we have our top level app, and if we want to scroll down into the group, we have our group with our split view, which we select the item. If there was more than 7 items, this would slide up and down, and then we can read this detail here about that specific item. You can go back. So you get that infrastructure for free. Let's go back and save that, and we'll close it, and then let's go and look at the same process but from the standpoint of some of the HTML framework, which there's actually a few more templates in HTML. So we're back to our new project screen, and this time we're going to select HTML. So this allows you to do everything visually that you might have done with XAML, albeit the markup is going to be different, but Blend will provide you the same properties panes and such to be able to manipulate that. But you notice in this case, instead of having some libraries, we still have, of course, a blank app, a grid app, and the split app that uses that split view. We also have a fixed layout app and a navigation app. Now, a fixed layout app is really using a fixed aspect ratio, and everything is kind of set in a certain way, and it's going to be compressed. It's not going to flex for as many scenarios. It's just going to get shrunk into the space that it has, so that there's some limitations to that. And then the navigation app, which is really around that two-tier model where you have an app bar, navigation elements on there, something like tabs, and then you can navigate about 2 levels down inside of the context of that application. And it's great for apps that are tasks that are somewhat disconnected, that you might switch quickly between them depending on what you're doing. So let's go ahead and create an HTML navigation app using JavaScript. Notice right now there's only one language. No VB script or any other old school material there. So here is our design surface. You can see that by default we get the HTML and default CSS open. If we select an element, we get the properties over here. And it's all HTML based properties, and we can edit them as we need. And then if we go to our CSS tab, we see all the CSS properties for the paragraph tag in which our text goes. If you're doing design work across multiple platforms other than Windows 8, this is probably the best kind of structure for you to use, because your design elements will work in most cases across the different platforms. You will have to do some work around, making your app possibly do all the same things, whether it's using different kind of hosted frameworks and that sort of stuff. But you can do your design work here and use other tools as well. And so that's really kind of the difference between doing the HTML versus XAML, regardless of the underlying language you're doing for the logic behind your applications.